will fit in this room. So yeah, I'll well the I didn't get into that point yet, so but I'm kind of thinking like the egos will barely fit in. I'll just go ahead and shut the doors.
Oh, what's wrong with this one?
All right, so we got a bit of arrangement here. So I have one of these new use like Macintosh computers, so I cannot show anything. So Gene will kind of do that. There's no connector that fits in this thing.
This.
Yeah.
Did you have Periscope?
You need to go to the agenda. So I have everything in the agenda. There should be also Notewell and everything else. So, yeah, so data tracker and well, she will also so.
Right.
Oh, we have one in medical. Good grief. Yeah.
Hi, Janet. But what Ben is saying that it wasn't
Good.
and need echo and that's so the way to. So they were talking about that and the pairs feeling thing from Gecko. Yeah. Okay, for people who are remote, we are dealing with some AV issues here, so give us a couple of minutes. I don't seem to be able to slip the off. You want to help us, Ben, on? So he's trying to get it. Yeah, we're getting feedback. All right, good.
Yep.
So we can see.
They have affiliation. That's on that. Go. Take yourself out. So you've only got this, this kind of connectable.
No, not this one. So
Does anyone have a USB to VGA adapter? Oh. I don't know.
Oh, well.
So who's outfitting the piece?
I am, but I can't get anything up there.
You want help with that?
Yes. Let's make it go.
No, in the meantime, I need someone to take pictures. Can you do that?
Oh,
Yes.
there we go.
Please. I
It's
can take
ugly.
over. I can take over here.
Okay.
I can take over.
Okay, so you can run it here. I have this. So these should all be open. Okay. So to have
So-
it open twice. But here you go. Here's that. We can switch.
Sorry for the hiccup. So we have a note taker, so thank you. And the blue sheets are here. Pen is here. Okay. All right, so again, so this IETF 98 and diameter extensions and maintenance. And the if you haven't seen the note well during the week, you have succeeded avoiding everything quite well. But pay attention and read the note well. So I have that part of my agenda. So for the agenda today, we don't have too many kind of topics, so I think we should be able to end early. And the any comments on the current agenda? Are you happy with that? Okay, that's a fair comment. Oh, you sent it to me?
Yes.
My it's Instagram. This is ESC. Absolutely. Yes. So okay. So let's go through the working group status. So first one thing. So we had a change of AD. So Ben is nowadays our AD. So welcome, Ben. Yeah, we had two changes during this week. If you follow the mailing list, you could see that we have Eric Reskola for a moment and then Ben. So we managed to wear out Stephen. Okay. So we have been doing actually quite good progress recently. So we pushed the so in ISG we have the agent overload and DIME load, and we also have the so these are progressing fine. They will be sitting in a misref for a while, So they are waiting for the rate control also to kind of progress. And for the rate control, we have a new version around. So Steve posted the update, including the last of the comments that we received during the working group last call. So that is just pending me to submit the proto write-up, and then it moves out of the working group. And then we have the group signaling. We are going to hear the update of this work again today. And then we have the actual active working item, what we have. So the RFC 40006 bits. And we are going to hear the update on that. And that's pretty much about the status. So any questions regarding the set of current work that we have on the working group? We don't.
Somebody want to cover scribe?
No. Okay. Jeez. Yeah, anyway. So I would expect that we are able to kind of complete all the overload related work pretty soon, which is kind of nice. So there's one concrete piece of work that we have been doing for a couple of years, and we are really seeing the end of it. Okay, so working group draft discussions. So we have two things. First, we have Marco talking about the group signaling, and then we also need to kind of decide what we do with this work. And then we have Lyle going through the RFC 400. Oh, Dave. Okay. Okay, so let's get started. So Marco, come up here. And so you can do wherever you want. So I'll just pink box is here. So you need to come here.
And then you can't see the screen at all.
So then you stretch your rubber neck and kind of look around. Let me bring your.
To see what's
You don't have the. Can I download them? I need one more. So where is the?
Oh, the group signaling wasn't
Should be.
I just wrote the line, so I have it in mind, more or less.
Oh, this one. Oh, this one. Okay, good. All right.
All right. So, very brief update on this draft. It's currently revision number 8. This draft and work is out for a very, very long time. But we finally managed to fix the remaining comments and clarification needs. And but we provided 2 updates before this IETF 98. And so far it addresses all the comments which we received. Also, authors had a read through and did a sanity check. So for most of the comments were related actually to the group assignment. A couple of comments were, or a few comments were about the group operations, where we really missed some text in clarification how the operation is supposed to be. So here we propose text on the mailing list and propose options with some preference from our point of view. And we got feedback, and that's how it's covered in the current release date. Brief summary on the key items that have been fixed, which is keywords must not should. So here we made a proposal, and of course need feedback from you if that has been covered well. Most comments, as said, were about the group assignment. So one comment was about server rejection of group assignment. So what happens if the server rejects group assignment? This is clearly indicated in the session allocation action flags of the session group AVP. and there's no need for the client to retry. So we add clarifying text here, and that was a comment from Steve. Partial success. So if the client requests from the server to assign a new session to multiple groups, and some of the groups are fine, some of them have been rejected in assignment. So we decided to make it clean for this draft, which means if one of the groups assignments fails, so the whole group assignment fails, and the client and server fall back to single session operation. Something more fancy is needed. I think future work can do that, but I think we need to try to keep the session groups clean, the state between dynamic peers and sync. No? Okay, maybe I keep it closer. Thanks. So client failure at server session group assignment may happen that the client requests from the server assignment of a session to one or multiple groups, and the server assigns. But in the response, the client sees that for some reasons, resources, whatever, the assignment made by the server fails. So what's the means for the client to feedback to the server? And we decided to keep it also clean here, which means the client must terminate the session and then restart the procedure without request for group session assignment. So that has been clarified in the current revision. Next one. Yeah, so what about a server rejection for a client's session group assignment? And Steve actually called that hard assignment because typically the session group info AVP is included in all the conversations between client and server. So what happens if the client sends a request to server, including session group info AVPs, but in the response, none of these AVPs is available. So the client should not retry session group assignment and start a single session request, and it may try for new session group assignments for other sessions. So that's the current text, how it's reflected. Typically, the server can reject group assignments, but then includes the session group info AVP in the response and sets the flag that the session has not been included. So not been assigned to the session group. If the whole AVP is missing, that's the current solution. What's being done. So there was some missing text on the operational part during group operations, and here we focus in particular on limited success. So what happens if a group operation has been requested and the operation succeeds for most of the sessions in the session group, but for some of the sessions the command fails. So far we have just indicated that the server responds with limited success, but how to treat these groups in sessions. So also here we propose text, and it has been the preferred option to be clean here and keep session groups accurate by first making the whole group operation fail for all sessions of the indicated session group, and second, the failed sessions need to be removed from all the groups to which the group command applies. Removing the sessions could have been made implicit, but there were some issues, so we decided to make it also clean here. In addition to the single session fallback for these failed sessions, we decided to start the procedure per section 422, which is about the explicit removal of particular sessions from a session group. So this is a little bit more signaling, but it's the cleanest way to keep client and server in sync regarding the session groups. All right, next slide. And that's basically it. That's the main comments that that have been remained from the last meeting. And so far we think the document is in a good shape, but we definitely need more reviews.
Okay. So thank you. So anyone want to challenge this, that the document wouldn't be ready for the last call? Because that's the next thing that I'm going to do to get the document moving forward. Yeah, and obviously complete silence doesn't mean that the document passes the last call. So I want some indications that someone actually read it. So keep that in mind. So you don't need, well, you know it. Okay, good. So we finally get kind of moving on and complete this piece of work. So how many years this has been around?
Sorry again?
How many years this document has been around?
Ooh. Many.
Many, okay.
So it's really time to close this work. And
Yeah, good. All right.
Any implementation?
Is there
Any implementations?
documentation?
No, the implementation.
Implementation.
Have you
no.
implemented it?
But that's the only work we see so far about enabling diameter to support group signaling.
Yeah.
So yeah, we may treat the document as it is even without implementation or any other status. I'm not sure experimentally if this is usually in the design working group.
Okay.
Lyle Bird, Sprint. I'm not aware of any implementations, but I will just flat out tell you there are several things related to congestion control in diameter that we will not, as an operator, really look at until this document's stabilized and we start seeing implementations. So I would say this is actually blocking more diameter-related applications in the congestion space than in other SDOs, or at least their implementation.
Okay, so thank you for indicating that maybe you need to drop this document to kind of prevent more work coming in. Okay. All right. Thank you, Marco.
Thanks.
The next one is Dave. Yeah, let me try to find the... yeah, so Gene will do that.
Hi, folks. I'm Dave Dolson. So we've been working with Lyle and my coworker Yuval. We were requested by the 3GPP group to refresh this. So we think, long story short, we think this document's in a really good state now. I'm going to go over the differences between this one and RFC 4006. We've seen some of this before, just refreshing everyone's memory. So this slide has what I think of as the mundane changes on it, because they're all pretty much things that we knew before we started that we had to do, and I think fairly obvious. We know we updated all of the RFC 3588 references to 6733, which the base protocol, which replaced it. That caused a few other changes to be required, and they're listed here as well. Updated 4005 references to 7155. There were references to 3GPP documents that were out of date. We updated. There was an errata on the 4006, which had been decided to accept, and so we implemented that. There were IPsec and TLS references that were inconsistent with diameter base, and so we updated those. The use of the encryption column on the AVP descriptions was inconsistent with the base protocol and the way other protocols had been done, so we removed that column. And the security section we updated to be consistent with the way other more recent diameter documents had been done. Next slide, please. More changes. First one's ambiguity about when restrict access action applies. So just making that clear. There'd been some questions about whether used services were permitted to go above the granted units, and we clarified that these are actually that you should just report usage and not clamp it to the granted units. It hadn't said anything on the subject before. We just clarified that was possible. Now the next one's a bit of an extension. It's adding a filter rule. AVP is now documented as permissible in the restrict access action. This is the more structured type of filter rule rather than the IPFW syntax. What's the other one called? IPv6 representations had been updated in RFC 5952 since 4006 had been done, so we clarified that the textual IPv6 representation should conform to that format. And there were questions about immediate graceful service termination. This is when granted units are 0. There were some hoops that the client had to jump through, do an extra round trip time before it was permitted to do the termination action. And now it says that the termination action is permitted if you get the grants 0. Lyle will correct me if I got that wrong. Right. Another thing that came up was we were requested to add IMEI to one of the enum group for user equipment info. And when we started to do that, we realized that the enumerations were not actually extensible. So we made the user equipment info extension, EVP, which provides a way, it's a group, and it provides a way of putting members in the group in an extensible way. And we applied the same approach to all of the other enumerations in RFC 4006. So now they're also extensible. Subscription ID, redirect server, and then the final unit indication, AVP, is also now permitted to use filter rule. So we did an extra, I don't think I described this quite properly. The final unit, no, sorry, it's the QoS prefix is new. There was a final unit indication AVP, and now there's a QoS final unit indication AVP, which permits filter rule with the final unit indication.
Yeah. So a quick note here. So
okay.
Yeah. So just like the enumeration has turned out to be kind of nasty thing many times, because it would look like kind of natural that you just add something. If it's understood, you get something meaningful back. But that hasn't been the case. So I've had the intention of fixing this for a long time, but never got around doing it. Yeah.
So we did have a discussion about this, quite an intensive discussion. And,
yeah, but that is probably something that should be kind of discussed at some point of time, whether we should be fixing it somehow that is also backward compatible. So it's not a trivial exercise.
So Lyle Sprint Park. So could you maybe then, after the meeting on the mailing list, bring this up as a subject, and we can start kind of a mailing list discussion on this, given to your point that this will be a long discussion.
Yeah, I can kick it off.
Okay.
Okay. So all those items just listed are in the appendix on what changed. I've convinced myself that that's a complete list of the changes. I did a side-by-side diff of the two documents and painfully went through all the changes. We don't believe there are any more issues. We haven't heard anything else. We've finished all this. This has been uploaded for, I guess, a couple of weeks now. Was it a month? Yeah. So we think it's done. We don't know of anything else to do on this, and nobody's asked us for anything else. So we would, our opinion is that it should be sent to last call.
So do you actually accept pull requests if someone wants to submit text?
We,
Pull requests.
we would read it and consider pulling it.
Okay. So okay. So all the authors think that this document is ready. Okay. So have you had any reviews so far outside this very crowded time working group? So I would be very interested to have someone review this document from 3GGP, excluding Lionel, because that's kind of assumed. But the so because we got this wish to update this document from 3GGP, it would be nice if you could engage someone there, and the like not necessarily on the same level that we had for the overload, but then we actually got very good reviews from 3GGP, and that would be kind of appreciated. So if you could go and ask around, I think you have some friends in 3GGP CT4 who would be willing to read this. Yeah, there are a couple of people. So basically, the all relevant and active CT4 diameter experts actually joined the overload work. So that's basically the list of people that needs to be involved. And we can do this as a part of the working group last call, or maybe before the working group last call. So we could actually. So if you have names in mind, let me know. So when I do the last call, I actually unicast a certain set of people in 3GGP, or make Lionel to kind of post that into a CT4 as in a role of CT4 chair. Because we need to be careful that we don't step on anything that happens in 3GGP on this spec, which actually implements it multiple places.
Okay, so if I don't know how to do that, is one of you taking action to do that?
Well, okay, so I can take on action on that. So when I kind of progress this into working group last call, I make my co-chair to kind of poke the 3GGP folks on this, and get them review.
And, how long would you expect?
You have? Oh.
Go to the mic.
Okay. Anyway, so are you done with this document? So presentation.
I'm done with this presentation.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay.
So what kind of timeline do you think we would give 3GPP to review it, or would we expect them to take?
So I'll go under radar next week. You won't hear from me. But once I get back, I can kick off the working group last call. So that would be the timeline. And at the same time, we will reach out the 3GGP people. And we can give this like an extended, like a 3 weeks period, for example, for them to review. So we would be done with the working group last call by the end of April. Or around that time frame. Okay. All right, thank you. How we are doing? Check. We are 6 minutes ahead of schedule.
I actually intended, even though it was only 20 minutes, to take 2 or 3 hours per slide for the next two presentations. So.
Always good.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about this individual on submission on policy group. So it's been more time on motivation rather than the structure. This was already introduced as 6 individual drafts in Berlin, but we wanted to keep this one going based upon feedback. So we have a couple of challenges with policies in general and the way they're actually being sent as an operator, the way they're being provisioned, the way users are being provisioned, the way it's being signaled over diameter. And we also have some underlying limitations. So what's important to understand is when we bring up different groups of users, different projects, different products, we tend to basically bucketize them, right? And then we develop policy around that. We also, though, are very bad at developing unique policies. So we tend to actually cut and paste an existing product's policy, modify it a little bit, let ourselves believe that it was a really great extension or deviation, and then about 3 months later, mysteriously we'll change it back without realizing we change it back, because we also, by the way, don't have something like version control for policies inside this. Most of these things are done through UI or Excel spreadsheets, which if you've ever tried to do version control through an Excel spreadsheet, for all of your major policy decisions, I recommend you don't do it. So we have several partitions then that it gets rendered under. So whether that's a VERF or an SDN table, it's there. We also have to support virtual operators, as I've said, right? MVNOs. We keep talking about slicing, and and we're talking about sharing, right? We have several concepts for sharing, whether it's radio or multi-tenancy in general in 3GPP. So we're starting to get a lot of overlapping rules, or I should say rules we intended to have not overlapping, and then we end up having them go right back to what they were. Next slide, please. So what we wanted to do was, try and figure out what we were going to get done, and we thought we'd go it alone in the sense that maybe it was just us or our process. And so we started with engineering and stuff, and we found that it's not optimal. So forgetting about the Excel spreadsheets for a second, it's just not tractable in the way we're doing stuff. The other side is, the best thing we could do underneath the switch, and we implemented some machine learning last year in some of our SDN software that was receiving policies that were driven by diameter. We inserted the machine learning, and what we found out was it was great, but it only applies learning at that machine. And so you're only as good as the amount of information fed to you. And in diameter, we typically don't like to pre-provision policies because we don't send down policies just to actually send them down for their sake. We actually have to have a live customer doing something. So it ended up being the machine learning worked great when we had a lot of customers using a product, but up until that moment, we stumbled a lot, and we ended up basically losing a lot of efficiencies. So the best option we have today is really the filter IDs, which are used for shorthand, but they only work across a link. And so if you think about that, your best optimization for developing a shorthand conversation is only point-to-point, and it's only between an enforcement point and a decision points. And so you have no system-level optimization. So unfortunately, each of these links have to learn. Or you go back to the, some sort of magical optimization structure. So we decided to take a slightly different approach. Next slide. So we looked at this, and what we realized was the way we've been doing stuff in terms of products and services and rules hasn't really changed in probably 50 years. We used to have something called service order codes or universal service order codes, which actually used to tell us how to physically wire the actual services for an individual. And believe it or not, at least in North America, we still use that terminology, even though we probably have nothing to do with wires whatsoever. So we still group people with products, we still group things with codes, and we treat them still as bits. Install this is available, this is not, in ones and zeros. And this was actually reaffirmed by our machine learning. What we started doing was we started matching up our service order codes with what the machine learning was telling us in terms of bit patterns. And strangely enough, we could equate a service order code, which was a long integer, back to an individual bit. And so obviously the bit representation was much more optimal. So what we did was we went to that design. So we do basically in policy groups represent the membership of an individual. As a bit field, we represent the potential matching membership of a policy also as a bit field, and then we actually apply a mask. This is very similar if you're familiar with SDN OpenFlow. to the metadata field that's actually applied in that switch. So it's an extra piece of data, has nothing to do with the existing filters, and that's really important. Treat it as an extra discriminator for filters. So we're adding something outside of the packet information that's provided by the control point through diameter into this to help us out. And just, once again, I want to remind us, right? So we did this over the current methods, which we have been using for a couple of decades, right? Even before diameter, even before radius, right? We have policy group identities, but we have to engineer and provision those, and we make mistakes. We have a list of identities and filter IDs. But, at the end of the day, all of this really depends on either sending the whole policy structure or pre-provisioning it. So once again, this is only as good as what you're sending over the individual units. Next slide. So this is the relationship model, and this is something we actually added since the initial draft. We've actually added this diagram into the overall document. So you see the policy entity, which we left as a very generic term, but think rule, filter rule, whatever predominant structure that you send or are using today. Base names, which if you're familiar with 3GPP, is just a hierarchy mechanism that's used for extra discrimination matching. But what's more important is for an authorized user, they're given a membership, which tells us a domain. So a lot of times domain's a pretty generic term, but we seem to be a little bit more, I think, or I should say we have a little bit more definition about it with slicing and with multi-tenancy now. So that's really where you put in your domain information and the values. So any authorized user has a domain and a value, and that value is a bit string, and the policy entity has an assignment and a match type. So these are all set relations. Next slide. So the end results was we ended up with I would say for us, a wildly improved minimization of our filters. So we, as an operator, like to think we're really great. We have over 50 million endpoints that we authorize on a daily basis. And the initial designs were over 200 million potential rules because of the way it was being done. After this technique, we went down to about 1,100. And then a colleague of mine who's also in the audience, Mr. Bales, went through and took another round at it, and we're sitting at, sadly, well, I won't go to the lowest number. Let's just say we're nowhere near 1,100 anymore, but it's pretty depressing. But a good example of this is, one of the biggest advantages is the any rule, the default rule. In SDN, your default rule is only one per table. So if we had 5 of these rules, you needed 5 tables. What we're able to do by adding the metadata here, right, this membership as an extra field, is we're actually able to take these default rules into the same table and use the membership as the discriminator. So you can take multiple default rules, except any traffic rules, and then add them to the same table, the same fib, as far as the policy enforcement is concerned or routing is concerned, and get it done. So the other side is, the net result is, if you have a common filter, but you want to treat people differently, you can do this at the same enforcement location with this technique. And so think of it in terms of, it's a way to more tightly tie the user to an extra field for discrimination outside of the packet. So next slide. So I'd mentioned the changes. So we added the relationship model. We added Mr. Bales as a co-author. There isn't anything else we've done in the document. So next slide. So next steps, I've actually heard from Dave. I've heard from Yuval. I believe I got, is it Maurice? I think also said something on the mailing list back from Berlin. So we've had a little bit of feedback. I'd like a little bit more. But my question would be, right, if there's no objections, right, we will probably start pushing for accepting this as a document going forward. Probably not today, given the tremendous amount of attendance that we have, but maybe sometime, hopefully, out before the next meeting.
Okay, so thank you. So anyone read this outside the authors? Oh. seldom when the half of the working group has read the document. Amazing number.
I'm worried because that almost looked like unilateral. I mean, it was almost unanimous. That would have been shocking.
Yep. So, for the rest of the working group, do you actually think this is useful work? So, Dave and you?
Sounds interesting.
Sounds.
I haven't spent a lot of time at it. Read the draft.
So, Dave, you think it's useful?
Yeah, reading the draft, I don't think as is it totally explains as well as it does when Lyle explains it to you. But I totally see how this is useful to avoid applying the same policy over and over again to all the users and just create the groups and assign them.
Yeah.
And I'd also like to say, Lyle, you did a really good job explaining it, and it's not that clear in the draft.
Okay.
So
And so, all right, we'll work on it.
Okay. So, why I'm asking like this is the kind of, I really need to understand that if it's going to be more than just a document exercise, so if it has a customer, a real customer.
We are implementing it in everything we can, but also keep in mind we're an operator. So
Yeah. Okay.
So
Is there a specific reason why you are not just doing it by yourself and asking for an application ID?
I envision these AVPs to be added to existing applications associated with authorization and in any sort of grants. So I don't expect a new application ID as much as these being added as optional AVPs in the existing apps.
Okay. All right. So I'm not going to ask for an answer now. So I want to see some discussion going around, and the especially on the point what Gene was saying, like
Yeah.
So please do that, and then we come back to it. We don't need to wait for the ROC meeting.
Yes. Yeah.
We can do things offline also. Okay. The next one.
All right. So this is an easy one, and for this audience, it's a lot easier than when I try to present it outside of this. Pretty simple motivation. We have a lot of authorization agreement, right? Whether it's NAS or we're doing the CCA application. And as you recall, we have the basic concept of units. We have used units and we have granted units. The reality is we're moving more toward a virtual world. And so anytime you grant something or you authorize someone for a grant, that's all well and good. But the problem is we also, or I should say, we also tend to have systems that also have a pretty good idea based upon past usage or profiled usage or even an SLA on what that grant actually means to the end resource. So in other words, a lot of the devices that we authorize, we actually know their usage patterns. And this is typically in other systems. And so one of the big problems we have in the virtual world, and it's really the problem that we solve by, I hate to say it, over-engineering and paying too much for hardware in the physical element world, is we would actually go in and basically just kind of make our best guess, run a number up. So what we wanted to do was kind of overcome that in the virtual space. So anytime you basically get some sort of authorization, we wanted to send an extra set of units that the client can ignore or can look at, but gives it some idea of the resource utilization of what that authorization just meant. And so what we did was basically we started looking into this, right? So we could do sizing and engineering, and we thought it was really dumb to have it as a separate system. I mean, right now, if I get an authorization with granted service units and I wanted to know What's the impact for me for packets per second? What's the impact for me for CPU? What's the impact for me for time? I mean, sure, we're giving 24 hours, but how much does he really use? And how much should he use over time? Right now, I have to do that as an entirely separate out-of-band system. And so it ends up being more transactions, more engineering, and other activities that I want to try to avoid. Next slide. So what we did was we went ahead and had the predicted service units AVP is being proposed to be sent back in these responses, whether it's the CCA or any sort of access service request, any sort of basic authorization or grant. We want to send back this. So the way to think of it is a couple of times. So anytime you actually allow a user for access and you grant them just basic authorization, you can send this AVP. Anytime you do a CCA and you get a response with a granted, you can also see this AVP. So once again, the proposal here is an AVP that goes along with existing apps, not new apps. So it's a pretty simple structure, but we have made some changes. So we did have a fairly complex filtering structure, and then we were asked to support time series. And so what we did, because it made a lot of sense, the structure was fairly flat, and it was really hard to, we were really having a hard time trying to get things like, well, every 15 minutes the guy does this, those sort of things. So there's a great structure, which is the time of day conditions in 5777. And so what we did was we just added that structure to the main predicted service unit structure. The net result is it removed most of the AVPs and really minified and simplified the spec since 00. So we've added that. And then the only thing we needed to do to represent the time series is create a formal structured list rather than saying multiple occurrences, because we wanted to be able to bring that in as a top level structure with some of the applications that we're doing at Sprint. This allows us to be pretty complete. I'm actually pretty happy with it. I originally started out with, I think, 7 AVPs. We got to 5. We're down to 2. So I'm really happy with the changes. So if you go to the next slide. So what we're really talking about is your predicted service units looks exactly like your granted service units, looks exactly like your used service units. The only difference is it has the time of day condition. If it's not present, then it applies, essentially indefinite, right, through all time. Once again, why wouldn't we add this to the granted? Well, it's a grant, it's not a prediction of usage, and obviously it shouldn't be reported in used service units. So we couldn't really fit it anywhere else, so this is the base structure. We also want to be very clear. A lot of our systems collect a lot of data, so it's really important to understand that we may throw a lot of predictions, if you will, or a lot of time usage back to the diameter client. We're also clear in the spec. The client can do with it what it will, right? So it may not understand every unit that's sent back, if it's a service unit of type CPU, or if it's a service unit of type foo or bar, right? This is something that's coming from an analytics system out of band. We have no idea, right, when we're sending it back to a client, whether or not that's useful. So the client can ignore it and ignore the entire structure, or it can take it for what it is. The most important thing for us is in the virtual world, it gives us an idea of memory usage and basically key metrics so that we can make more informed decisions when the client receives that grant. So next steps, we've had some feedback. Once again, I believe Dave provided some feedback and you've all, once again, before the Berlin draft. But we'd like more on this one because we did make essentially the major structural change and made the collapse. Yes. And as far as this, we like it, if there's not a lot of feedback, we'd like to go ahead and push for this being adopted.
Ben Campbell is an individual. I haven't read this, so take my question with a grain of salt.
Sure.
Have you considered that there may be any privacy considerations in talking about user behavior here?
Absolutely. I know we've got a lot of concerns, but what I would say is yes, because you're assuming that prediction. Well, I would just always assume worst case that prediction is very user specific, and at best case which is actually bad for the operator. Best case, it's a generalization, right? Which actually isn't very useful. It's good, but it's not useful. So yeah, we would like a lot more help on that. But I'd also like to point out, right, we're already using, because this is a user level authorization or grant, we're already halfway into that mess. And so I guess arguably the spec is putting the other foot into that situation. We're jumping in both feet. So absolutely understand.
Yeah, I think the other foot is that we're including information about how we think the user is going to behave, which is, I assume, is based on past experience of how the user behaved. So.
Or models, or
yes,
or, yeah, absolutely. So, I think the minimum that we need to do is probably have what I'll say is an exhaustively long security consideration section at the minimum.
It's becoming popular these days to have separate privacy consideration sections.
Okay.
It's
Yeah,
not that big of a deal how
well,
you structure it.
yeah, absolutely. I'm just kind of thinking that at the end of the day, we may have a longer privacy considerations section than we do the rest of the spec on this one.
We have 4 minutes time.
It's David Olson, Sandvine. Back to the list of metrics, if you don't mind. Yeah. So, I mean, this looks like a GUI type application usage,
Yeah.
but I think the idea is you would report these to any type of application.
Yeah,
And-
yeah,
and
absolutely.
So I probably should
Yeah,
clarify that to say, you can report, usage, or maybe the privacy considerations will say you should not report usage to like policy enforcement or an application that doesn't otherwise collect usage.
yes, yeah.
Maybe give
absolutely.
there might be a way you can help with that. Also, in that list, would you report things like, disk usage and CPU and things
Well,
like that might help more than
Well, if you go back to
octets?
the struct, okay, right? So we did find, or I should say, we did kind of follow the standard USU GSU paradigm, and so arguably what would happen is for that dimension that would be in server specific units, right? Right, which is a more complex structure.
Is that what's in there?
Yeah.
Okay.
But also remember, this is just one dimension. So if we want to talk about adding multiple dimensions with the same time of day conditions, we can look at that, but it would have to be a more complex structure. Here we were just going for what I would say is usual and customary and consistent way of reporting the service units. And so if you go one page earlier, Yoni, yeah, so it'd be down here in the predicted service units series, right, where you would put individual dimensions, or maybe one dimension with multiple different time of day conditions if that filter, if you needed multiple representations of that. So that would be your containing structure for that.
Sorry, but inside predicted units, I think you can list multiple things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So isn't that multiple dimensions?
Well, we can.
Is that-
I would say it's really there are options there,
Yeah.
and it's kind of back to when you do multiple service units in a GSU, right? It's very akin to what's happening today, right? So we do see people packing more than one unit in, and we also see other people then sending multiple type of grant structure simultaneously. So we've seen both. So yeah, but we wanted to keep it consistent with the main base specs with USU GSU. But if there's a compelling reason to maybe change that, then let's definitely talk about it on the mailing list. That's it.
Okay. So Dave obviously has read this. Okay. Again, half of the working group is amazing. So okay, so we don't have both of these items in our milestones at the moment, and the actually I don't even think they fit in the current charter as such.
We're assuming the E in the extensions piece is where.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The evil E.
Yeah. Doesn't
So-
that stand for everything though? Not extensions, it's everything, right?
So, okay. Anyway, so what is the AD's view of bringing new work into DIME? Because that would pretty much undermine the our secret agenda of winding this working group down.
Ben Campbell with the AD hat on. If there's interesting work to do, then the group can do it, I think.
Yeah.
It would be good to see
More people.
some people, at least on the list, expressing an interest that, this is stuff that they would work on and hopefully implement.
Yeah. So honestly, my biggest concern about the about in any new work of completing the 2 items that we have is that the after the all overload, which was kind of peak in our history of doing stuff, there's pretty much no interest in what we are doing anymore, because there's no, except for this kind of point interest of doing something, like, but you have your own implementations coming and you want to standardize that, which is fine. But I'm kind of worried about the breadth of interview if the active number of the working group participants is like counted in one hand.
I won't be surprised, given some of the things coming out of the 5G space, if we start seeing some more things cop over. I see, we see some things that are hinted at by virtualization here today.
Yeah.
And
But it will take some time before they kind of wake up.
right, so they're way up. They're still operating at more architectural levels, I think, than they are.
Stage 3 hasn't really started on the 5G, so
Wait until CT4 gets a hold of this stuff.
yeah.
I think we need to talk about that. I think it's perfectly reasonable to ask on the list what kind of interest we have in these work items.
Yeah.
I just became the shepherding AD this morning, so I don't necessarily have an opinion yet on does it make sense to spin the group down versus keep it open. It's not uncommon for maintenance groups like this to operate in a kind of a dormant mode until work comes in.
Yeah, so
Which that doesn't say that, we want to be dormant so we don't take work, right? That's kind of dog wagging the tail. If there's work, you do it. If there's not, you're dormant. But again, even just the people in this room with a pretty small set to take on new milestones with.
yeah,
If there are more people that are interested, then that changes things.
yeah. So me saying wind it down doesn't mean we would be closing. It's more like waiting for the maintenance items and these kind of things coming up. But yeah, so I definitely would like to kind of first ask a bit more around. And I mean, I have nothing against about the work proposed here. I mean, it looks like a sensible piece of work that you have already done, but it's not any goofy stuff. But just would like to see kind of a bit more interest on it. It becomes easier also for you kind of get input outside the editors for what you're doing.
And right, and by interest, I assume you mean interest in at least reviewing, if not working on it directly. It's very easy for people to say they're interested in somebody else doing the work.
Yep. Exactly. So, but again, like for the previous presentation, so this doesn't mean then that nothing happens before Prague.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we can do a lot of things on the email list. So I would kind of shout out for the more interest, and then look for where we can. Adding a milestone is easiest step. So if we need to kind of take on the work and go from there.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we are now in the point on the. We are 5 minutes late of my original schedule, so still like 25 minutes early. So, any other business? Or if not, we can say that we are done for this IETF, and we will see the rate control going out of the working group, signaling going for the working group last call, and also engaging with 3GPP on the and also the 406 piece going working group last call and engaging 3GP with that, and then asking around the kind of general ambition level on working on this new policy group and the predicted units work. So that's the immediate next steps after a week, most likely being initiated. So, and the for these new two pieces, so the authors can do it by themselves, and I will kind of come back to this topic also within 1 week, asking like trying to kind of sense the interest level on working on this. So that's pretty much it. So thank you guys, and see you in Prague and on the mailing list. It's an escape key. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, same
Yep.
here.
Yeah, okay.
They're asterisks.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're unfailing. No, I was.
Thank you. I have one very Doesn't take the
All right, so as I said, there were okay, so